The vast expanse of space stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, a tapestry of stars and swirling nebulae that seemed both infinite and indifferent. Cale Arvid leaned against the cool glass, his breath fogging the surface as he stared into the void. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant, almost comforting presence, but tonight it did little to soothe the storm brewing in his mind. He had always found solace in the stars, in the quiet solitude of the cosmos, but lately, even they felt distant, as though they too had turned their backs on him. Behind him, the soft chime of the ship's console broke the silence. Cale turned, his boots clicking against the metal floor as he crossed the small cabin. The message was from Lyra, his partner of 7 years. Her face appeared on the screen, her dark eyes framed by the faint glow of her workstation. She looked tired, her usually vibrant features softened by exhaustion. "Hey," she said, her voice warm but tinged with a weariness that made Cale's chest tighten. "I just wanted to check in. How's the mission going?" Cale forced a smile, though he knew she could see through it. "It's going. We're still analyzing the artifact. It's complicated." Lyra nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I can only imagine. Just be careful, okay? I've been reading the reports, and the energy signatures you're dealing with are unlike anything we've seen before." "I will," Cale promised, though the words felt hollow. He wanted to say more, to tell her how much he missed her, how the weight of his guilt was crushing him, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he asked, "How's the terraforming project coming along?" Lyra's face lit up, and for a moment, the exhaustion faded. "It's incredible, Cale. We're making real progress. If everything goes according to plan, we could have a fully habitable environment within the next 5 years. It's everything we've been working toward." Cale smiled, genuinely this time. "That's amazing, Lyra. I'm so proud of you." Her expression softened, and she reached out as though to touch the screen. "I miss you," she said quietly. "It's not the same here without you." "I miss you too," Cale replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be home soon." The call ended, leaving Cale alone once more. He sank into the chair, running a hand through his disheveled hair. The guilt was a constant ache, a weight that pressed against his chest with every breath. He had betrayed Lyra, the woman he loved, and no amount of justification could ease the pain of that truth. It had started innocently enough. The mission to investigate the alien artifact had been routine, or so he had thought. The artifact, a massive structure of unknown origin, had been discovered on a remote planet at the edge of explored space. Cale had been assigned to lead the expedition, and Dr. Elara Voss, a renowned xenobiologist, had been brought in to assist. From the moment they met, there had been an undeniable chemistry between them. Elara was brilliant, her mind as sharp as the edge of a blade, and her passion for discovery was infectious. She challenged him, pushed him to think in ways he never had before, and in the isolation of the mission, they had grown close. Too close. It had been a moment of weakness, a single night when the weight of the mission and the loneliness of the void had become too much to bear. They had sought comfort in each other, and in the heat of the moment, Cale had forgotten everything. His duty, his loyalty, his love for Lyra. It had been a mistake, one he regretted almost immediately, but the damage had been done. The sound of the cabin door sliding open pulled Cale from his thoughts. He turned to see Elara standing in the doorway, her auburn hair catching the light from the corridor. She hesitated, her green eyes searching his face, before stepping inside. "I thought I'd find you here," she said, her voice soft. "You've been avoiding me." Cale sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I haven't been avoiding you. I've just needed some space." Elara crossed the room, her movements graceful despite the gravity of the situation. She perched on the edge of the console, her gaze never leaving his. "We need to talk about what happened, Cale. We can't just pretend it didn't." "I know," Cale admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "But what's there to say? It was a mistake, Elara. One I can't take back." Elara's expression hardened, and for a moment, Cale saw the fire that had drawn him to her in the first place. It wasn't just a mistake, Kale. It meant something. Maybe not to you, but it did to me. Kale looked away, unable to meet her gaze. I'm sorry, Alara. I never meant to hurt you, but I love Lyra. What happened between us? It can't happen again. Alara was silent for a long moment, her hands clenched in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, though Kale could hear the pain beneath the surface. I understand, but you need to figure out what you want, Kale. You can't keep living in this limbo, torn between two worlds. It's not fair to any of us. She stood, her movements deliberate, and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back to him, her expression unreadable. Just remember, Kale, the stars don't judge, but they don't forgive either. The door slid shut behind her, leaving Kale alone once more. He stared at the empty space where she had been, her words echoing in his mind. She was right. He couldn't keep living like this, torn between his love for Lyra and the undeniable connection he felt with Alara. But the thought of losing either of them was unbearable. The console chimed again, pulling Kale from his thoughts. It was a message from the IEC, marked urgent. He opened it, his heart sinking as he read the contents. The artifact had begun emitting strange energy pulses, and the team was being recalled to the planet's surface for further analysis. The mission was far from over, and Kale knew that the choices he made in the coming days would shape the rest of his life. He stood, his resolve hardening. There was no more time for hesitation, no more room for mistakes. Whatever happened next, he would face it head-on. The stars might not forgive, but they also didn't wait. And neither could he. The planet's surface was a desolate expanse of jagged rock and swirling dust storms, a harsh reminder of the unforgiving nature of the universe. Kale adjusted the seals on his environmental suit, the faint hiss of pressurized air filling his helmet as he stepped onto the barren terrain. The artifact loomed in the distance, its alien architecture both mesmerizing and unsettling. It pulsed with an eerie light, the energy waves radiating from it distorting the air like heat ripples on a desert horizon. Behind him, the rest of the team disembarked from the shuttle, their movements cautious and deliberate. Alara was among them, her presence a constant reminder of the tension that had settled between them since their last conversation. She moved with purpose, her focus entirely on the task at hand, but Kale could sense the unspoken words that hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Let's make this quick, Kale said, his voice crackling over the comms. We don't know how long these energy pulses will last, and I don't want to be caught in the open if they intensify. The team nodded, their faces obscured by the reflective visors of their helmets. They moved as one, a well-oiled machine trained for moments like this. But as they approached the artifact, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air was thick with static, and the ground beneath their feet vibrated with a low, almost imperceptible hum. Readings are off the charts, Alara said, her voice calm but tinged with concern. The energy output has increased by 300% since our last scan. Whatever this thing is, it's waking up. Kale's stomach churned, but he forced himself to focus. We need to get closer. If we can find the source of the pulses, maybe we can shut it down before it becomes a threat. The team advanced, their movements slow and deliberate. The artifact's surface was smooth, almost organic, with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and change as they approached. Kale reached out, his gloved hand hovering just above the surface. The energy radiating from it was palpable, a low thrum that resonated deep within his bones. Careful, Alara warned, her voice sharp. We don't know what kind of reaction direct contact might trigger. Kale hesitated, then pulled his hand back. She was right, of course. They were treading on uncharted ground, and one wrong move could spell disaster. But as he turned to address the team, the ground beneath them shuddered violently, sending them sprawling. What the hell was that? One of the team members shouted, their voice tinged with panic. Kale scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding. Stay calm. Everyone, report in. One by one, the team members confirmed they were unharmed, but the tension was palpable. The artifact's light had intensified, the pulses coming faster and more erratically. Kale's mind raced, trying to make sense of what was happening. But before he could formulate a plan, the ground split open with a deafening crack. "Move!" Kale shouted, grabbing the nearest team member and pulling them back as a chasm opened beneath their feet. The team scattered, their training kicking in as they sought cover. But the ground continued to shift, the artifact's energy surging with an almost sentient fury. Alara was closest to the artifact, her movements slowed by the unstable terrain. Kale saw her stumble, her balance faltering as the ground beneath her gave way. Without thinking, he lunged forward, grabbing her arm just as the earth crumbled beneath her feet. "I've got you!" Kale shouted, his muscles straining as he pulled her to safety. They collapsed onto solid ground, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the weight of the near-death experience hanging heavy between them. "Thank you," Alara said quietly, her voice trembling. Kale nodded, his throat tight. "We're not out of this yet. We need to get back to the shuttle." But as they turned to regroup with the rest of the team, the artifact's light flared brighter than ever, a blinding burst of energy that forced them to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the artifact was gone, replaced by a swirling vortex of energy that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. What is that?" one of the team members whispered, their voice filled with awe and fear. Kale's mind raced, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. The vortex was unlike anything he had ever encountered, a gateway to somewhere or something beyond their understanding. But before he could voice his thoughts, the vortex began to pull at them, its gravitational force dragging them toward it. "Hold on to something," Kale shouted, grabbing onto a nearby rock formation. The team followed suit, their grips tightening as the vortex's pull grew stronger. But it was no use. One by one, they were ripped from their holds, their screams echoing in Kale's ears as they were swallowed by the vortex. Kale's grip faltered, his fingers slipping as the vortex's force became too much to withstand. He felt himself being pulled into the void, the world around him dissolving into chaos. The last thing he saw before everything went black was Alara's face, her eyes wide with fear as she reached out to him. When Kale opened his eyes, he was no longer on the planet's surface. The air was thick with an otherworldly mist, and the ground beneath him was soft, almost spongy. He sat up, his head spinning as he tried to make sense of his surroundings. The rest of the team was scattered around him, their forms barely visible through the haze. "Is everyone okay?" Kale called out, his voice echoing strangely in the dense atmosphere. One by one, the team members responded, their voices shaky but unharmed. Alara was the last to answer, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here." Kale moved toward her, his heart pounding. "What the hell just happened?" Alara shook her head, her expression a mix of fear and wonder. "I don't know, but I think we've been transported somewhere. Somewhere not on our map." Kale's stomach churned as the reality of their situation sank in. They were stranded in an unknown dimension, with no way of knowing if they could ever return. But as he looked around at the team, at Alara's determined expression, he felt a flicker of hope. They had faced the impossible before, and they would do it again. "We'll figure this out," Kale said, his voice steady. "Together." Alara nodded, her resolve mirroring his own. But as they began to explore their strange new surroundings, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The mist seemed to shift and swirl around them, as though alive, and the air was filled with a low, almost imperceptible hum. Whatever this place was, it was no accident they had been brought here. And Kale knew that their journey was far from over. The mist clung to them like a second skin, damp and heavy. As Kale led the team through the alien landscape, the ground beneath their feet was uneven, a strange blend of soft, spongy material and jagged outcroppings that seemed to shift and change as they moved. The air was thick with an otherworldly hum, a sound that resonated deep within their bones and set their nerves on edge. Kale's mind raced, trying to piece together what little they knew, but the truth was as elusive as the shifting mist around them. Alara walked beside him, her movements deliberate and cautious. She had been quiet since they arrived, her sharp mind undoubtedly working to make sense of their situation. Kale glanced at her, noting the tension in her posture and the way her eyes darted around, taking in every detail. He wanted to say something, to bridge the gap that had formed between them, but the words felt inadequate. Instead, he focused on the task at hand: survival. "Do you think this is some kind of pocket dimension?" one of the team members asked, their voice trembling slightly. Or maybe we're inside the artifact." Kale shook his head, though he wasn't entirely sure. "I don't know, but we need to find shelter, someplace where we can regroup and figure out our next move." The team nodded, their faces pale but determined. They moved in silence, their footsteps muffled by the strange ground. The mist seemed to thicken as they pressed forward, reducing visibility to mere feet. Kale's hand hovered near the weapon at his side, though he doubted it would be of much use against whatever lurked in this place. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a structure. It was unlike anything Kale had ever seen, a towering monolith of smooth, black stone that seemed to absorb the light around it. The surface was covered in intricate carvings, symbols that pulsed faintly with a soft, blue glow. The team hesitated, their unease palpable. "Do we go inside?" one of the team members asked, their voice barely above a whisper. Kale exchanged a glance with Alara, who nodded slightly. "We don't have much of a choice," he said. "We need answers, and this might be our only chance to find them." The entrance was a narrow archway, just wide enough for them to pass through single file. The air inside was cooler, the hum quieter but still present. The walls were lined with the same glowing symbols, casting an eerie light that illuminated their path. Kale led the way, his senses on high alert. The interior of the structure was vast, a labyrinth of corridors and chambers that seemed to stretch on endlessly. The team moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing softly in the stillness. Kale's mind raced, trying to make sense of their surroundings, but the architecture was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was both ancient and advanced, a paradox that defied explanation. As they ventured deeper, they began to notice strange artifacts scattered throughout the chambers. Some were small and intricate, while others were massive and imposing. Alara paused to examine one, her fingers tracing the surface with a mix of curiosity and reverence. "These symbols, they're a language," she said, her voice filled with awe. "But it's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's almost alive." Kale frowned, his unease growing. "Can you decipher it?" Alara shook her head. "Not yet, but if I had more time." Before she could finish, the ground beneath them shuddered violently, sending them sprawling. The walls seemed to shift and twist, the symbols glowing brighter as the hum intensified. Kale scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding as he realized they were no longer alone. Kale's mind raced, trying to formulate a response. "We didn't mean to come here. We were brought here by the artifact. We just want to go home." The being tilted its head, studying him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. "Home," it repeated as though the word was foreign. "You seek to return to your world?" "Yes," Kale said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "If you can help us, we would be grateful." The being was silent for a long moment, its glowing eyes fixed on Kale. Then it turned to the others, its form shifting as though consulting with them. Finally, it spoke again. "You may return, but there is a price." Kale's stomach churned. "What kind of price?" The being's gaze shifted to Alara, who stood frozen in place. "One of you must remain. A life for a life. This is the way." The team erupted into protests, their voices filled with fear and anger. Kale's mind raced, trying to find a way out of this impossible situation. He couldn't leave anyone behind, but he also couldn't condemn them all to this place. Alara stepped forward, her expression resolute. "I'll stay," she said, her voice firm. "No," Kale shouted, his heart breaking at the thought. "We'll find another way." Alara turned to him, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and determination. "There is no other way, Kale. If this is the price, then I'll pay it. You need to get the others home." Kale's chest tightened, the weight of her words crushing him. He wanted to argue, to find another solution, but deep down he knew she was right. They were out of options. The being nodded, its form shifting as it raised a hand. The symbols on the walls flared brightly, and the air around them began to shimmer. Kale felt a strange pulling sensation, as though the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. "Wait!" he shouted, his voice filled with desperation. "Elara!" But it was too late. The world around them dissolved into light, and Kale felt himself being pulled into the void once more. The last thing he saw was Elara's face, her expression calm and resolute, before everything went black. When Kale opened his eyes, he was back on the planet's surface, the artifact looming in the distance. The rest of the team was scattered around him, their faces filled with confusion and relief. But Elara was gone. Kale's heart ached, the weight of her sacrifice pressing down on him. He stood, his legs trembling as he faced the artifact. It was silent now, its energy subdued, as though it had fulfilled its purpose. The team gathered around him, their expressions a mix of grief and gratitude. "We need to go," one of them said quietly, "before it wakes up again." Kale nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. He had lost Elara, but he had also gained something, a renewed sense of purpose. He would honor her sacrifice by ensuring that her work, her legacy, would not be forgotten. As they boarded the shuttle and prepared to leave, Kale took one last look at the artifact. It stood as a silent sentinel, a reminder of the choices they had made and the price they had paid. But it was also a symbol of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The journey home was quiet, the weight of their experience hanging heavy in the air. But as Kale stared out at the stars, he felt a flicker of hope. They had faced the impossible and survived. And though the road ahead would be difficult, he knew they would face it together. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the endless possibilities it held. Kale took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. Whatever came next, he would be ready. For Elara, for the team, and for himself.